Start? 2 more minutes. Cool. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Good. Welcome. Thanks for coming to our expert panel session today. My name's Oliver Lorraine Wedd. I'm a senior multimedia designer in the vocational education design team. I'm really happy to be facilitating today. I understand that everyone's quite busy at the moment, and we really appreciate you coming along to listen and join in the conversation today. So we'll begin the session with a welcome to country. So RMIT University acknowledges the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. RMIT respectfully acknowledges their ancestors and elders, past, present and emerging. RMIT also acknowledges the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business. So today's think tank question is, what is best practice in and the potential impacts of mobile-first design for the vet, industry and skills and training? So to help us explore these questions today, we have Damala Ghosh, lead learning designer for the Learning Hook, Stacey Murray, vet author and content writer, and Colin Hickie, the head of learning design and production at the National Excellence in School Leadership Institute. Thanks for coming, guys. So before we launch into the presentations today, I just wanted to provide some context around the question. So the idea of mobile-first design originally gained a lot of prominence with the launch of the first iPhone in 2009. I remember this fairly well, as I was still completing my advanced diploma in multimedia at the time. My classmates and I were busy making a fairly content-heavy website, and our teacher at the time just got a shiny new iPhone, and he was very enthusiastic about it, and halfway through the project cycle decided that we needed to make iPhone versions of the website, and this didn't engender many great feelings towards the guy, but at the time, because there was no real learning about mobile-first design, it just sort of entailed recoding the whole thing when we were stressing out, trying to get a lot of other stuff done, as you do when you're a student. So yeah, it was a very frustrating introduction to the idea of mobile-first design. But here are the cold hard facts about mobile usage. So in 2015, 52% of global internet users access the internet by using mobile devices. At the end of 2019, we're looking to see, due to increased mobile consumption, we'll have driven this number to around nearly 80%. In the US, consumers spend nearly 90% of their mobile time using apps. So given this seismic shift to our use in mobile devices to conduct our day-to-day activities for things like banking, shopping, ordering pizza, travel, Uber, all that sort of stuff, it would seem obvious that the e-learning space would sort of join in this shift towards mobile design or mobile use. But are we actually ready to do that? Is the student or the user or even the industry ready, or does it understand how to move forward with this sort of thing? Hopefully today we can gain a better understanding of where our industry sits within the current design climate. Also, we're live streaming today, so I think Josh will be taking questions from the live stream and presenting them to the speakers when we get to question time at the end. And just if you do have a question when we get to question time, please press the little speaking man icon on your thing so you can be recorded. And I think that's it. So thanks for coming along, guys. We'll start off with our first speaker, Colin Hickie. Thank you.
Hello there, thank you. I'm Colin Hickie, and I'm the head of Learning Design and Production at NESLI, which stands for National Excellence in School Leadership Institute. So a bit about me, first of all, is that my background is predominantly in higher education. So I was like education technologist, education designer at the University of Edinburgh, back in Scotland, and then came here at the University of Melbourne doing a very similar role. Then I shifted slightly in between to Open Universities Australia, which was still higher ed, but still had this kind of like more commercial slant to it. And then have kind of ended up at NESLI, which is more commercial side. So kind of taking what I've learned at higher ed and more the commercial and then moving over to this has been really challenging, but it's very enjoyable at the same time. So my roles have included being in learning design, working user experience, and kind of shaping that with project management and product management over the last 8 to 10 years or something in this sector, so yeah. And at the moment, my interest is kind of blending some of these project management tools and workflows into learning design and educational programs. So that's kind of taking more of a product kind of marketing and commercial approach to some of the learning design and some educational technologies and how they can be shaped to create like quicker workflows and quicker designs. And yeah, that's what I'm kind of exploring, and I think that's a very exciting area to be in. As we're also live streaming, I'd like to thank my team, if they're watching, Camille, Vladana, and Ray, for all the help they've had to get me to this point. So thank you very much. So a bit about NESLI. We have been creating educational programs and training since 2014, and then this is mostly in the schools space, but it does transfer over to industry and workspace workflow as well. So the focus is on building skills and capacity in leadership, managing people, and well-being. So it's a big focus on giving you the tools and experience to manage people and manage difficult situations and problems, but also focusing on yourself as well if you're not getting the advice and the help and the support that you need to kind of give that to progress you through. And some of those programs are like Staff Wellbeing Toolkit, which is based on well-being and resilience. And then a lot of them are based on middle leadership, so early leaders, middle leaders, and we go to advanced leadership, so the whole kind of spectrum of people, where they are in their careers as managers or leaders, or yeah. And I work mostly in the Australian team, but we do kind of focus more, start to focus more in America and Canada and the United Kingdom. So it's quite a global organization, so I would deal with a lot of stuff in Australia during the day. In the morning, I've had plenty of emails from the US, and at the end of the day, sometimes the UK counterparts will come in, so I'll need to like deal with it. So very busy indeed. So a bit about our top-level learning design. So we have been, over the last year, started to move more into Canvas and design more for that LMS and bringing a new kind of look and feel, a new kind of visual design, and a new kind of how we approach the learning to that LMS. So at the moment, we deal with programs that are fully face-to-face, that have blended learning, so face-to-face and online, and fully online. So we're working in a few different areas that we want to develop. Our kind of learn design methodology is to define, design, develop, and deliver. So we kind of move through these phases to deliver these educational products. It's all about dialogic learning and work-integrated learning. So we have a lot of scenarios, we have a lot of issues of stuff, assessments that they need to work through that they relate back to their own workplace. So less on theory and more on practical strategies and exercises that you can do. And to develop these programs, we have plenty of design workshops within our own organization, as we have plenty of experts and SMEs in this area. And we take on a lot of participant feedback from our program. So there's a lot of iteration, there's a lot of continuous improvement to help develop these courses fully. So that's kind of the background of us, and then on to more like how we develop in mobile learning. So we definitely focus on the visual identity and the UX design of this. So when we're thinking about developing programs and courses, it's all about how it's going to, where they're going to use it, how they're going to use it, and if we need information or content to them, do they need it very quickly, and so it's quick and accessible. Having easy navigation, so we work through as a team and across the organization what works best, how do you progress through this course, is this wrong, is this right, and then there's a lot of iteration of that. Also focusing on making it activity heavy, so there's a lot of stuff to do. It's not just like reading information, it's not just absorbing stuff, it's like actually taking it on and doing stuff with it there and then. So we have a kind of talk about the participant journey. How do they go through it? How do they access it? We take a more linear approach. How would they work through this mobile app? What are the touch points? We look at every area of what they need to learn. And when we're designing, we kind of change maybe for what it would be on like using it at home on a laptop or a computer as opposed to a mobile, because some things we try in a mobile might not necessarily translate well to desktop or laptop computer, and vice versa. So there's a bit of to and fro in there. We also try to focus on a lot of engaging activities, such as engaging in a lot of podcasts, because a lot of people can listen to that on their way to work, on the way home from work, at lunchtime. Using a lot of videos and quizzes. So there's a lot of engaging material, there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of doing something. And when we're focusing on what's on the app and what's on the LMS, we kind of research and review what's happening there. And what happens in the mobile, what happens in the desktop kind of informs each other. So we're kind of looking at both at the same time. Looking at some of the future and some of the stuff we want to do, and some of the stuff that's probably more what I think as well. I think a big part of mobile design would be the customer service, which would be relating back to the students. So it would be much better for the students to have more notifications, more automated resources for them to work through. Rather than relying on a human person, I think mobile could deliver that in a way that's a lot streamlined. It would help with the awareness of deadlines, assessments. I think having more activities in terms of coaching and support and using bots and edu bots would be a fantastic resource to have. It would help them to have that information a lot quickly and not have to rely on waiting on someone and things like that. I think mobile could have a lot more impact on interactive sessions, such as surveys, training on the go, targeted specific skills. So the mobile learning and mobile design could have more focus on what they specifically need, and using collaboration software such as Slack to have discussions that's in real time. It's not like a forum, it's live, and the learning is live, basically. And I think the micro-credentialing, micro-courses that we are starting to explore a bit more as well, that will be some sort of like gamification elements, but also kind of an engagement that is very visual and very engaging for the learner. And moving probably a bit further in the future, augmented reality, and using for training situations. So we would have stuff in schools, having difficult conversations or difficult meetings. That could be simulated in some way that brings it to life a bit more, and that would be like role plays and content and that. And then getting probably even further is that the learning could be developed automatically through what the participant's data is as well. So They would have assessments and content that would come related to them based on what they've submitted into the LMS. The assessments would be catered for what the LMSs already saw that they have encountered so far. So it's changing as it goes along. It's adapting to their learning styles. It's adapting to what they've experienced in that. So, yeah. And thank you.
Thanks, Colin. That was really interesting. The idea of talking about automation for mobile design in learning, that's cool. Into that. Stacey, thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks, Ollie, and thank you, Colin, for that really interesting presentation. So a little bit about my background. Today, this session really represents the merging of the two halves of my working life. I am a social media and digital marketing consultant, so very much in that business, I focus on creating an easily digestible, appealing, engaging message for my own business and for my clients. The second part of my working life focuses on learning design, assessment writing, and I'm also writing some content for a textbook that'll be published next year. So as Ollie mentioned at the outset, many more people are using mobile phones to access the internet these days. More than half of all online traffic is driven through mobile phones. What is yet to catch up, however, is the amount of time that people spend per session when they're on their phone. So people are spending, when they're using a laptop or a desktop to access the internet, they're actually spending much more time on their laptop, even though individual discrete sessions are larger with mobile phone usage. So it makes sense to design education resources for that mobile future. It's certainly the way that people are going in terms of their internet usage. What I believe is lacking at the moment is creating an interface that makes people want to spend more time on their phones. So creating an education experience that reflects the way people actually want to engage with their education is probably the next step. And I believe that the basic principles that apply to any kind of mobile phone design apply to education. So certainly within my business, the things that I'm looking at when I'm creating online content is things like chunking of texts. So rather than having very text-heavy content, creating resources that have perhaps less text but have the opportunity for people to link into more in-depth detail if they want it. So rather than a textbook where it's all there in front of you, having shorter pieces of text that then people can explore further if that's their particular need or interest. And this also involves things like using lots of headings, making something that makes good use of white space so that it's not overwhelming when it's looked at on a small screen. Other factors I think that apply to mobile-first education design are things like graphical representation of information rather than textual-based information. And of course, using video. Video is a really good way to actually to convey complex information, but in a very accessible format. But of course, if you think about how most people actually use video these days, the majority of video usage is actually consumed with the sound off. So that's a consideration. So if you're actually showing like a talking head kind of video, captioning becomes really important, especially if we're trying to encourage people to use content or engage with content in the way that people typically are, so those short, sharp sessions. If you can have captioned content so that people can use their phones on the train or in those micro opportunities that we all get where we generally pull out our phone. I think responsiveness is important as well, just recognising that people are using a wide range of devices. So having something that looks and works equally well, whether it's on a tablet, whether it's on an Android, whether it's on an iPhone, becomes important in design. And also design for vertical usage. So if you think about the typical laptop or desktop experience, it's designed for landscape, whereas mobile phone usage tends to require a portrait format. So creating your menus, your drop-down menus, your navigation from one point to another, using gestures that we're familiar with, so using swiping, using those hamburger drop-downs becomes really useful when creating a mobile-friendly experience. I think when thinking about mobile design, I think assessment becomes the challenge, and I certainly don't claim to have the answers on this one, and I'll be interested to hear if anyone has any feedback on that front. I think formative assessment is easier in that there's certainly multiple choice, flashcard kind of drag and drop, self-assessment, instant response options that we're probably all familiar with that can easily be applied to mobile usage. I think the more summative assessment's the challenge. How do we move away from traditional text-based assessment in a mobile-friendly format? I think, look, a lot of younger people these days are writing essays on their phone. God knows how. I certainly couldn't do it. But do we look at video assessment? Do we look at people actually submitting what would traditionally be submitted as a text submission in a video format? Do we allow students the option of actually recording a video on their phone and uploading that as their assessment? I think the other challenges are around validity, certainly in terms of if it becomes things like online multiple choice. The challenges that we've always faced around how do we know that students' work is actually their own becomes greater because it's really easy to pass your phone to your classmate and say, here, do this for me. It's probably just a magnification of the challenges that we've always faced. I look forward to hearing from my fellow panellists and anyone in the room here if they do have any solutions to those challenges that I think we need to address before we really progress mobile-first design. And I look forward to talking with you all about it further. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey. Some pretty interesting insights there. Really good. Damala, third and final speaker. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks Stacey and Colin, really enjoyed your talks. So I'm Damala Ghosh, I'm lead learning designer at the Learning Hook. We create custom digital and blended learning solutions, experiences and resources. And my background, I'll just give you a very brief background. So I used to teach multimedia at Holmes Glen TAFE many years ago, and I've now been a learning designer for 4 years. So this topic is quite massive, and so I decided to focus my talk, given the scope and the length of it, really on how people producing content or learning content that is going to be delivered on a mobile device can actually do that. So it's going to be a really practical talk. So I'm really targeting this talk at people who are producing content, people like learning designers, subject matter experts, and teachers and academics. So let's get on with it. If I can get this working. Okay, so why mobile first? I believe it's about customer service, and it's also about being inclusive. Have a look at this graph from a survey done by Deloitte last year. So this question is asking people, what kind of device do you have ready access to? 89% said they have ready access to a mobile phone, 76% for a laptop, and only 52% for a desktop. We have to remember that not all workers have a desktop or an office-based job, and not everyone can afford their own computer. But if the shoe doesn't fit, don't force it. There are some types of training and learning content that just will not work if you try and deliver it on a mobile device, and that is the first question you need to ask yourself before you start going down that route. Some examples are very long or complex reading material, any kind of desktop or kiosk-based software training. Jane, we had an experience trying to do some kiosk-based training on a mobile to suit mobile delivery. It really was difficult. Any kind of environment simulations, complex maps or diagrams or forms if they can't be simplified or sequenced. Also PDFs are problematic, and anything where you require the learner to type in a lot of text. So these are my 5 best practice principles, and I'm going to write a jingle for this afterwards, so I'll share it with you. So 1, know your tools. 2, get on the grid. 3, it's hip to be square-ish. 4, less is more. And 5, the sticky note rule. So let's go through each of these. So you've decided your content is suitable for mobile delivery. The next step is to understand the development tool at your disposal and know what it can and can't do, what its strengths and weaknesses are. So custom HTML or WordPress, fantastic, very flexible, can do a lot with it, but it requires more expertise and investment in terms of time. Storyline has long been the e-learning favourite, but it only scales down on mobile, so not a good option. Articulate Rise and Evolve are rapid tools with a responsive output, so they're fantastic on a mobile, but you will get a very templated look to those. And lastly, Canvas, can't overlook Canvas. Canvas is a really powerful course builder, an all-in-one kind of tool, but we know that the mobile app experience is a little unstable and not always a great one. So, next, let's talk about grid design. So imagine you've made a sandwich and you cut that sandwich. Oh, thank you very much. Try again. You've made a sandwich, you've cut the sandwich into 4 squares. You can now arrange that sandwich any way you like on your plate. That's grid design simplified. So imagine that your content is in smaller chunks, and then those chunks will then stack nicely on a small screen. So image shape matters. So for fixed width images, I'm not talking about responsive images, a 4:3 ratio is the best compromise for both desktop and mobile. And so you can see the example on screen here. Portrait or square is great for mobile only, but it really doesn't look good on desktop. Once again, this is only a rule of thumb. There are many exceptions to this rule, but it's just a great rule of thumb to work with if you're developing content that includes images. Next, we've got principle 4, less is more. So the UX researchers, Nielsen Norman, have done quite a few studies on readability and comprehension on mobile phones. And they're, in a nutshell, they advise that we create scannable, concise content. Interestingly, their suggestions align with good practice in terms of accessible design principles. So they include things like writing in plain English, using really great heading hierarchies, creating shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences, short bullet lists, minimal punctuation. So if you're a lover of the semicolon, reconsider it, and using key messages, like I've done on this screen. And lastly, principle number 5 is the sticky note rule. So this one is really simple. Just ask yourself, can my content fit on a sticky note? So I'll now quickly run through some common issues and then a couple of examples of mobile design hacks that you can use when you're developing your content. So once again, this is very much from a content design perspective, not from a development perspective. So we're not going into the very technical side of things. So very common issue is the wall of text. What might look fine on your desktop computer in terms of paragraph length can end up being very dense and unreadable on a mobile. Another common issue I come across as a lead in my QAs is people creating environments. So scenes where you want people to identify a bunch of elements in that scene, or maybe you're going to put a bunch of hotspots in there, that becomes pretty much unusable on a small screen. And anytime you're trying to put too much content in an interaction reveal, that could be a pop-up window, it could be a flip card, it could be an accordion, whatever, just keep that really short, because we really don't want to be scrolling on a mobile within a pop-up window. More problems are endless, very verbose bullet lists. Bullet lists should be short. They create more problems than they solve. PDFs, especially forms, are pretty much useless. Long headings is a really common problem. They get truncated or can cause layout issues. And depending on the development tool you use, usually I'd advise only using 2 tabs. This example is from Rise. You might be able to get away with more depending on the length of your headings and things like that. Complex diagrams, it's something I commonly deal with in terms of content coming from SMEs. They become pretty much unreadable, as you can see here. Okay, so let's look at a few things you can do. So the first example here is some great work RMIT have been doing, extending the Canvas UI UX using CSS and JavaScript. These are just a couple of examples of the work that Edwin Ang has done for the microcreds team. This was from last year. I'm sure more great work has been done in the meantime. But these actually, at the time, were working really well on the Canvas app as well. Then the Canvas app had an update. Anyway, that's another story. Flip cards are also fantastic on both desktop and mobile. This example is from Rise, but you can also get them in Evolve and create them in custom. And another one that's not very well used, or I think is a bit underutilised, is animated GIFs. You can see in this example, yep. They're actually a really great low-cost solution for short sequence concepts or narratives. You just need to make sure that they're no longer than 5 seconds. So they need to stop after 5 seconds to comply with accessibility standards. So as long as they stop after 5 seconds, you should be fine. Videos and animations are always winners on mobile, but they can be more of an investment to produce. Smaller budgets or for soft skills, including involving conversations, audio can work really, really well. And carousels are great for simple steps or sequences and concepts and things like that. Visual stories can really engage an audience, and comics are a really classic example of that. They can display really well on all screens if you use the grid approach. So you need to create individual square panels, and then they'll stack on the mobile. So this example is a comic we produced for the RMIT Consent Conversations credential last year. And as you can see, it worked perfectly in the Canvas app. So it was readable on all devices. So that's it from me. If you'd like to learn more, check out our blog and our podcast series at thelearninghook.com.au. And if you remember only one thing, remember the sticky note rule.
Awesome, that was great. Thank you so much. Really interesting stuff and really practical. I feel like we should print off some of those slides to put around our office, maybe. Yeah, cool. So now I think we're going to open it up to the floor and the people at home, if anyone's watching, to ask any questions. Did anybody have? Yes, Josh. Go in, bud.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah. I've got 2 questions from people watching our online stream, which is great. So Marcus P has asked, are there any statistics on the percentage of students who access Canvas via mobile compared to desktop or laptop, as well as how well is it received by the students?
I don't have that insight. That's, yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, and if you're going to have a chat, just make sure you turn it.
Canvas app is not very helpful.
No.
on the mobile phone. No.
No, that's, yeah, well documented gripes with the Canvas app, yeah. Yeah. No, great question though. What was, yeah.
All right, so from Hisham, as the trend of mobile learning has already started in schools and includes more multimedia visuals, how are we adopting the LLN of students and their reading and writing capabilities? It's a big issue nowadays. Anyone from the panel like to have a go at that?
Just make sure that you click your little talking man icons on so they can. Yeah. Sorry, can we repeat the question again, Josh?
As the trend of mobile learning has already started in schools, and includes more multimedia visuals, how are we addressing the LLN of students and their reading and writing capabilities? It's a big issue nowadays.
Anyone? Sure, go ahead. Yeah, just make sure you click on your button there.
Oh.
There you go.
Is it clicked?
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Lino Rhodes. I'm the LLN project coordinator in the Vocational School of Design and Social Context.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. So what I heard today about the accessible design principles and what Stacey was saying about the layout, I think goes a long way to addressing LLN needs for students, especially students who have learning difficulties or disabilities. So the way that we present our information is going to go a long way towards addressing those issues. Pardon? Yeah, and I think a lot of students who do have learning disabilities or issues, literacy issues, can access a mobile phone and can use a mobile phone where they may not have digital skills in other forms like tablets, or especially tablets, they're really difficult, and computers. So I think mobile devices can work.
Yeah, sure, depending on the student. Very interesting.
Comment on that as
Please.
well. Yeah, I would agree with what you said, and I think mobile first design caters for more learning styles than may traditionally have been the case. And certainly if you're providing content in visual or graphical format or even video format, it's working for people who perhaps don't have the LLN skills that others have, but also just catering for those that are perhaps visual learners or auditory-based learners.
That's great. Go ahead, yeah. Oh, you might have to.
A lot of institutions are already moving to assessing these students on online, like the computer-based exams are already coming in. Monash conducts most of the exam now on computer-based. So I think a lot of universities are already moving in that space. So we should never underestimate the young generation or the generation Z. Their learning capabilities are quite exhaustive. Although they are writing, sometimes we think they are really addressing hey, hi, like that. But that is not coming from within. They are coming from more outside factors.
Right.
So if we can address that, these students can be really engaged and do quite fantastic job.
And I do a lot of work with schools, but that's more with the staff and the teachers, but like enabling them to be like their digital skills and their capability to then pose that on the students is a big thing that we try to get onto them. If they're able to show students that they can learn through the resources and the toolkits that we provide them, then that kind of goes on to the students. Of course, that only works if your students are allowed to use their phone in the classroom as well, but that's a different story.
Very good. Sure, go ahead.
I was just going to add that currently the techniques you're talking about would certainly help address students with LLN issues if they're wanting to meet the vocational learning outcomes. But many of the units of competencies also have literacy, numeracy outcomes that have to be met as well. And that won't be met necessarily by just making the vocational learning more accessible. So that's a challenge that if you're going to try and build the literacy and numeracy skills, that's an additional task to making the learning accessible.
Can I add to that critical thinking skills? So giving them all the resources is usually not the answer. It's allowing them and teaching them how to find credible resources, not just giving them. And that's difficult, as you say, on a mobile. So I actually don't think you should rule mobiles out, but I don't think it's the only solution. I think it should be part of a bigger thing. And encouraging higher level literacy skills is important, not necessarily just the base skills.
Any of the panellists like to speak on that? No? Okay. Next. Yeah. Anybody else? Jack, go ahead, mate.
Yeah, a lot of, in the commercial environment, a lot of content's been modified to suit the Google SEO algorithm. So it's, I suppose it gets higher rankings and things like that. And Google's algorithm uses things like the Flesch-Kincaid reading ease test to improve readability. Do your organisations work to any of these sort of tools to improve readability in that method, or is it a little bit more organic? Sorry.
Can you hear me? So yeah, we don't use any tools specifically. There is a pretty useful online tool called the Hemingway app, I think, which is a free online tool. The main tool is me in the QAs. And that's just something that I'm always working on within the team and within my own writing as well. It doesn't come naturally to really write in a very concise, clear manner necessarily. So it's really about really using that headspace, using common words that can be really hard when you're a subject matter expert, using an ordinary common word instead of an industry-specific word. And so, yeah, that's just something that initially and ultimately I'm kind of responsible as the main QA point in our business.
We have a web developer / graphic designer who makes sure that we're kind of adherent to any accessibility standards and makes sure that the flow, he has built a lot of websites, so he kind of brings that towards our team in the LMS and Canvas app and the Canvas desktop version. So not any particular tools, but the main tool is a human again, and he whips us into shape of how it should flow.
I know in my own business that working within those SEO best practice constraints can be difficult, especially where you are explaining complex topics. The SEO principles favour short sentences and not using one of my favourite things, the semicolon. So, and all of those, it can be difficult to link complex concepts without and still work within SEO best practice. It's a challenge that I face in my own writing, and I certainly don't profess to have all the answers. I think it's a work in progress, and I think perhaps as writing styles evolve to work within those constraints, it may become easier. But also perhaps as we learn to use mobile phones more for reading more complex material, it may be that what is considered best practice in accessibility does expand.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point about learning how to use mobile phones more effectively. I think that's something that could be thought about for sure. Sure, go ahead. Might be the one next to it. Oh. Try the other side. Oh, someone else got another one on. Oh, can one of you guys, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm actually an academic skills advisor for VE students. I spend a lot of time in the library with students, and I see them working on computers, not mobile phones. When I see them on mobile phones, they're often playing games. Now, and as a teacher, I know that that's the main complaint in classrooms. When I was teaching in a classroom, I allowed them to use phones, but I controlled it over what I wanted them to do, and mostly research. But the more advanced stuff I have not yet seen happen on a mobile phone. I've tried it myself and I've tried to get students to do it. It's just very difficult to read a complex document and understand it. What happens is you take the first sentence and you sort of extrapolate from that because you don't want to keep scrolling. So we have a lot of misunderstandings from that. I still think we need to look at all the devices we can use, not just one. And accessibility can be lost accessibility can overtake the need for progression in learning. We need to scaffold these learners, not just allow for accessibility and then leave it at that. These learners need to be scaffolded into learning more advanced concepts and therefore more advanced language styles, etc. And the semicolon, it's got a purpose.
Yeah, so we recently did a course for the Department of Education and Training on wanting to train their staff on creating accessible documents. So their preferred tool to use is the Hemingway app. So it's definitely worth jotting down and checking out. It's a free app, it's online, it's really easy. It's not perfect, but it does an okay job. And I could debate the semicolon. If you actually go to the Australian government website on creating accessible content, it says minimise punctuation, do not use the semicolon, use dashes or commas instead. But this is for reading online. This is for online reading. We're not talking about just general any writing. Anyway, so it was interesting, I thought.
If I can just make a comment on what you were just saying as well, I think one of the challenges that we need to consider with mobile usage is there's many years and an incredible amount of research that's pre-existing, and focusing primarily on mobile makes it hard to access a lot of that research material that is just scanned PDFs, or it is stuff that's been published some time ago and is not available in an accessible digital format. It's really something that lends itself to reading more on a big screen. So I think we do need to be careful to not limit the access to that wealth of material that exists out there, and stuff that is written in perhaps a more formal academic semicolon-rich style, that still needs to be accessible and be considered, and to show students depth of critical thinking that they have looked at that stuff that's already out there.
Went here, I think if we know, I come from engineering background, and VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality, without the mobile phone apps or without mobile phones or iPads or anything, Google Eye, all those sort of things, is first of all, students are like, these are the apps there, or their uses are so drastic that the engagement of a student happens. They can look at three-dimensionally what is happening, and they can really pinpoint the engine opens from here, piston comes here. So these are the engagement tools, and evidence also come when the instructor can really ask those things very easily. So this is the way to grow. And I'm not sure about multimedia or where you have a language thing, other sort of thing, but most of the engineers are engaged here. And a lot of universities are spending a lot of money on these tools.
Be a case of the right tool for the right job kind of thing, I think, in the context of augmented reality and things like that. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if anybody's done any research into how students actually move between different devices and formats depending on need, because I know that at least a colleague at La Trobe who I was working with did his study around, like, they'd done mobile first design, and then he did his PhD around that and found that students would, depending on the problem that they were working on, would choose, may start off on one device and then move to the other one because they'd get stuck and they'd continue the problem. But I guess it didn't necessarily interrupt the state of flow. They could move between those spaces. So I guess, does anybody else have any kind of research around that? Or, so I think that's probably worth taking into consideration, is just, we've got assumptions either way around either people having access to phones, but the way that they use them is different matter.
I think Google have got some research around user journeys across different platforms. That's as much as I can say. So I did come across that when I was sort of doing a bit of reading about this. But it's definitely true that generally people are, there's multiple touch points across multiple different types of devices when they're seeking information. And now we've got even more devices coming out, the smartwatch and all sorts of things. So, and it's true, people will use different tools depending on what their requirements are. And I think, going back to your point, the point everyone's making is that mobile is not the solution, it is just one option for people. And it's for certain types of courses, if it suits, if the content and the training suits and the assessment suits, it's a great option because it just gives people more opportunities to study when they want to, where they want to. But it doesn't always suit. There's a lot of stuff that, for me particularly, I like to print things out and read them if it's really kind of something I really need to get my head around. But if I really need a quick kind of to solve a problem or I really want to find out something quickly, the mobile's great. Or for sort of high-level stuff, it's really great. So it really depends.
Another point on that, do you have any, as part of your style guides, do you make any recommendations around disclaimers or instructions, in terms of you should be doing this kind of work on this? I mean, apart from, I guess, when something won't work on a particular browser, but are there other kind of guidelines that you provide your learners around what, how they should be engaging with certain content or elements?
It's a great question.
Yeah, we do that, and that kind of happens at a stage of like learning design stage of developing the program. So it's when we're thinking about a new program or a course, and when we're through the making of the structure and design and learning intentions, it's always thinking about how this is going to be working in practice, I guess. So that's why we have led like the graphic designer and our learning designers to be advising on such areas like that. And like you would, it would be like something like you would just have a video and then you would have follow-up questions below it. You wouldn't have video, then a scroll of text, then resources underneath. It would just be like, might be okay on a laptop or a screen, but when we're talking about mobile, and if, as you asked, like if they're switching between them, that's not going to work. So we kind of have to come to some sort of happy medium sometimes in the way, which might not work best, but it needs to be something that's kind of more in the middle that, appeals to most of our learners rather than a select few. Yeah.
A really small tip to add to that when you're writing, use device agnostic instructional words. So instead of saying click on this, say select. Right.
Our team had this conversation just last week, I think. Yeah.
Select. Select is good.
Yep. Go ahead, Haley.
Thanks for the presenters and lovely work, and it's great that there's such a discussion occurring about this. It's very interesting that people have big opinions about mobile first. I think we're past the point of the early adapters where everybody's sort of coming on board. Do we need to what level of support would you have for those late adapters, or moving forward, is there still a place for written text? Is there still a place of supporting people as we move forward? This generation's growing up with mobile first, but is there ways to move away from that? I know I'm talking about being devil's advocate here. I know we're talking mobile first, but is there opportunities that maybe mobile first isn't the right way?
Great question.
I think, thanks Hayley, I think that it comes down to what we were discussing before, that there will always be courses where mobile first design is perhaps not entirely appropriate. I think for most courses there's certainly an element where aspects of it can be delivered on mobile, but there'll always be courses where it's perhaps not so appropriate. So I think it's just a question of understanding where and to what extent mobile design is appropriate, and not getting so hung up on the concept of mobile that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You really need to focus on the learning outcomes and start with those learning outcomes and work back from that rather than starting with, okay, we're going to do this thing on mobile, let's make the content mobile friendly. I think you need to look at the content, look at the required learning outcomes, and then decide what the best approach is on a course by course and subject by subject basis.
To not get seduced by the technology, if you will. Like, yeah, totally. Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Nick Bowser.
Yeah.
Last year we launched a carpentry program online. Basically, it's online for students in remote areas. They don't turn up here at all. They only come here for a week, basically. And they use mobile devices. Now, the thing, disregarding all the nice trimmings, bandwidth kills it.
Yeah.
Absolutely kills it in remote areas. 2 bars if you're lucky. And the evidence, what we require, RMIT require, is video evidence of you doing something.
And uploading the video.
And they ready? They do it on 4K instead of 1080. And the upload just dies.
Bet you it looks good though.
The upload just dies from what we found. And what some of the students have done is they're actually now trying to email the video back in. And it's ridiculous. So if you've got somebody who's in the middle of nowhere, and there's 52 of them, 52 kids are out there, and they don't use iPads, they use these because they're on site. They're on site. So their assessment says, I'm exaggerating, show me nailing 3 nails in, for example, and they have to do that as part of their assessment. So every time, and they go, 2 bars. What am I going to do with it now? That's been the biggest flaw with it, and Canvas being a bit like that as well doesn't help.
Great points.
Any of you guys come across the bandwidth problem?
Yeah, go for it.
Just a short one for us. So we do a lot of work for Australia Post, and that's definitely a problem. So particularly for videos and animations. So we have a workaround with them where we need to create carousels that basically replicates the content. So from the other perspective, us as an e-learning vendor don't really need to deal with people uploading content, but access to internet is a big problem for people in regional areas, and it's something that hopefully our government can really help in the long term, because it's digital exclusion really if people haven't got good access to internet.
Just another one on that one. We're just about to launch another one in the same sort of construction region. I think people know about one as well. And it's the same problem again. The students are not here. It's part of the WTIF funding from the government. It's an initiative the government introduced for learning out in the middle of nowhere. And this is the problem we're finding. So this is the second program coming on stream now, and they're going to hit the same problem. And it's all on site. It's on site. They're not at home.
Yeah, but I think it should just be noted that it's not necessarily just a regional area problem. It brings to light, I think, questions of economic exclusion. If you can't afford a good quality internet service, or perhaps yours is a household where you've got multiple people. In my household, I have a uni student and a Year 12 student. Plus, I operate a digital business myself, so we chew through a lot of data. So, and there are times when our upload speed in suburban Melbourne is incredibly slow, just for that reason. So I think it's something that definitely needs to be considered, and bore in mind when people are thinking about mobile first.
And because we work with a lot of schools that are rural, we think that's the design issue that should be identified a lot earlier on, because that's going to come up now and then. So for stuff that's rural schools, we have programs where there's just one person who is a spokesperson for a group, for a school, and people in the school will submit work to them and then they'll submit it. So it's not relying on 25 people having more than 2 bars. It's just the one person, and they submit it that way. So I think some of those issues could be resolved at the design stage, and I don't know if that's brought your idea or it was brought upon you, but that was something that I would identify earlier on, that this is going to come up, yeah.
Students are no closer than 50 to 60k away from one another. That's how scattered they are. They never see each other. You can't do group work.
Sorry, I don't have an idea, a solution.
I just thought that your point about, whether we should be considering print-based materials more or analogue learning. So once again, using Australia Post as a case study, a lot of the training needs to go out to people in regional postal services that don't necessarily have great internet. And so we have at times had to take an online course and actually backwards kind of render it to be a print-based course. And then sometimes translating the online activities into print-based activities is really interesting. But I think once again, also from a parent's perspective, I think it's really important for us all to consider limiting our screen time just for our own mental health and well-being as well. So the fact, if we're actually offering course materials in various modalities, analogue and digital, I think that's a really, it's the best kind of case. I think sometimes the mobile first and digital first is sometimes also driven by costs and also, businesses needing to go paperless, and also reducing the cost of training and the cost of, printing out lots and lots of handouts and things like that. When I was at uni, I used to get a big book like this, a big A4 book with all my readings for that particular subject. But yeah, that probably doesn't happen anymore, I'd assume. So yeah.
We've actually gone to workbooks, exactly what you're talking about. We've mailed them out. It's the only way we can do it. What we have now is we have 2 staff members who are actually driving around, who also have to visually see stuff being done, picking them up and dragging them back. So it's gone from to...
Very sure. Sorry, I think the gentleman just behind you had a question, sir.
Can I offer some idea? So when you collect this video evidence, I would strongly consider scoping how high-res the video needs to be. It might not need to be 1080p. It could be like much smaller.
Doesn't need to be 4K.
No, it doesn't. Definitely not 4K. But like, if it could be smaller, maybe you could restrict in the app, like make a separate app that records video. So they're not using XYZ recording app, but like it's built in.
The answer to that one, ARC, what we use is perfect. Students can't use it. If they could use ARC, it would work. But we're not allowed to use ARC, students.
Why not? Okay.
It's probably licensing, so number of users, yep.
Yeah, sure, we've got another one. Yep.
All right, so another question from people watching online, which is great. So who's got it right out there? Do you have any examples of a provider that has designed mobile-friendly resources that have knocked students' socks off, but also yielded sound learning results?
Can I add to that? What sort of analysis is done of the final results? Is it just answering a simple question, or are we looking at whole units of competency and the underpinning skills and knowledge?
Well, for us, it's not just answering questions. It's like the whole kind of, we do a lot of participant feedback and focus groups on like how they got on and looking at the amount of times it took them to, do quizzes or upload assignments. It's the continuous improvement of looking at just small details of when they go back and forth, and also identifying kind of every issue and all the feedback that they have that given to our student support team. And that goes back into design. That's kind of how we do it, yeah.
That's from the student user perspective. What about from the teaching perspective, where you're assessing for not just that skill, but for the underpinning skills and knowledge as well?
That's not really the area that we go into, but yeah.
I would say that assessing that underpinning skills and knowledge is the challenge, because it's very hard to take a holistic approach to the learning outcomes that draw on performance evidence and foundation skills and underpinning knowledge, that kind of stuff. And I think that's where the challenge will lie. It's very easy to assess where you've got binary responses or multiple choice or something like that, but when it comes to actually contextualising that knowledge and showing that you have applied some critical thinking skills, that becomes more of a challenge.
Great points. Lionel, go ahead, mate.
Thank you. So I think you, all the panel, thank you for your time. And I think you made very good arguments of why we should use mobile as an alternative. And, you know, the more platforms, the better, I say. But my question is that even though mobile is great, how do we empower more people that are not technically savvy to develop content that is mobile? In your organizations, do you actually have a dedicated team that takes in the content to create mobile-friendly versions of it? Or do you actually utilize special tools that make it easier for non-technical people to develop mobile-friendly content?
Good question.
Answer that. So we have both. So we have developers creating stuff in HTML and WordPress. Then we have learning designers who will then work in rapid tools like Evolve and Rise. And then when we work, say, for RMIT with Canvas, we'll work with a developer again, so in the Canvas environment. But because all of our design, everything that ends up, we definitely have a pipeline that goes learning designer, then development, so graphic designer, developers. So all learning designers need to really understand design principles for whatever platform we're designing for. More and more our clients are wanting the courses to be mobile compatible. In the past, it's really in just the last couple of years. Before that, it wasn't always a concern for people. And still now, some of our, depending on the course content, sometimes we agree at the start that this is not going to be suitable for mobile delivery, and we just don't even bother trying to do that. But using something like Articulate Rise, anyone, you all could use Articulate Rise. It's so easy, and it's got a great output. So it really depends on the tool and then your budget for the tool, I guess.
For us, we make use of very minimal tools because we try to keep it like as simple as possible and to make sure that it works on a desktop and a mobile. So it's that we don't want students to get flustered or adapting to tools as they go along. Also for our developers to and our SMEs to work with those tools. We keep it simple, like HTML based with adding visuals and graphics and a lot of working on the UX navigation within Canvas. But we don't rely too much on tools, so to speak. Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is for any Canvas users out there. How do we implement those structured widgets like navigation, accordions and carousels within the Canvas editor?
That's a spicy topic, that one, yeah.
What's the best way? I don't know.
I don't know if we're allowed to. I don't know. Yeah.
Why is it spicy?
There's a lot of robust.
In many ways, it's not supported. You can do it, but if you break something, it's on you're on your own, really.
Yeah. I'm finding it's limited. The editor is limited in what you can actually put in there. Is there a way that we can alleviate that limitation?
I don't know. You need to have conversations that go a bit.
This is a long one.
Above our heads, maybe. Yeah.
Is there a way to use that kind of feature within the RMIT ecosystem, but maybe not within Canvas?
To iframe it in, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I don't know how.
I don't know if I could talk about it.
I don't know how mobile friendly that is.
Something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, I used to try and get accordions into like programs, but I was told off not like to, because it was not friendly. I think it was Victor that you were talking about, Kate. Yes, who like, yeah, it was not mobile friendly and it wasn't participant friendly. So we try to keep it more simple than that.
There's also that fear that I think, I hate to say it, but sometimes accordions kind of mask a problem of just having too much content. And so you tend to just go, stuff it in an accordion and people won't notice that actually we've got too much content, then we should be cutting things out.
Certainly, I agree. Sometimes it is the right decision, though, design-wise. And I'd like to be able to implement those if possible.
Yeah.
I can answer if it's okay. Just talking about our experience designing for RMIT, designing and developing some micro-credentials. Last year we were working on a suite of micro-credentials, or staff micro-credentials, and we, having had experience before, we were very conscious of what interactions and what kind of design elements we had at our disposal. And so we really limited what we were doing to those. So you saw some examples on screen. At the time, they were working really well. So the accordions, tabs, and you could do kind of image reveals as well. And then we were doing things like chunking up the graphics and things like that. And everything was looking really good. Then this year we did the consent conversations course using the same principles, and it was just about to be delivered, and there was a Canvas app update. And so suddenly things just weren't looking or appearing the way they should.
This was a couple of months ago, was it?
Sorry?
Was this just a couple of months ago?
Yeah, this was a couple of months ago. And then previously in 2017, I did some work with the Creds team, and they were able to do a lot more with multimedia in 2017. So it seems like every kind of update in the Canvas app seems to to reduce our options. So I think my guess is that there's kind of issues with stability. So while you might be able to actually do things with JavaScript and CSS, as long as you're doing it RMIT side, you never know when Canvas are going to update their app and suddenly it's just looks like a dog's breakfast.
It's not their policy to support any like customizations, basically, Canvas's thing. It's fun. Yeah. Go ahead.
What this conversation seems to bring up is about innovation and mobile first, that it's limited by your operating system or what you're doing there. How do you deal with struggles of like, I want to do this, I want to be innovative, but I'm limited by either space, or we've mentioned about recording assessments. I know we're going slightly different from design, and we're talking about storability, stability. Should that play into design, or should we just be pushing innovation?
Can you repeat the question again? What should play? No, just a summary of it.
So I guess there's two parts to it, about innovation and pushing and being, we want to create mobile design that's interactive on many different levels, but also dealing with the struggles of we've got to make sure that it's stable, that we can have storage space. If we've got 45 students, as an example has been mentioned about storing assessments. How have you dealt with that balance of wanting to be innovative but also dealing with the structural issues?
Does anyone? I'll have a go at that first, and then pass on, because I think for us, good writing and good design, you can do a lot with simple stuff, and so it's really about, I guess, thinking outside the square a little bit, and I hope I showed you some examples of that. For example, we know that animations are great, videos are great, but bandwidth may be issues, cost issues, time issues. So you can use carousels, or you can use animated GIFs. Animated GIFs, last time I looked, were working on the Canvas app. So as long as they don't go more than 5 seconds, you'll be fine. So yeah, there's, I guess, it is tricky. And sometimes we just go back to really good design for that works in print. So, you know, using really good big headings, good heading hierarchies, breaking up your content with nice images and stuff like that, that really goes a long way to producing a great user experience.
Yes, so I think that's part of the design limitations, and I think having limitations is actually a really good thing, because then you can blow out something that's not necessary and is poorly designed because you think you can use everything and you can't. And you for 6 months down the track, students can't actually do the thing that you thought was a great idea in the first place. So knowing of those limitations and having all those kind of limits that you have on what students can do and what the design could be is like actually a great thing as from my point of view as a designer, because that then gives the innovation of how you navigate around that, how you think actually that's not a good idea. Because of those limitations, this is actually a better way for the students to learn in the pathways. So I think the innovation comes out of being forced to go in a different direction sometimes, yeah.
I would add to that I think the danger is to innovate for innovation's sake. And I think we should always be starting first with the student experience and the learning outcomes, and developing materials, whether they're mobile or laptop or hard copy or whatever it might be, that best support those outcomes and the student experience, rather than focusing on how can we push the boundaries of innovation.
Great,
just
that's
add
a
on.
great point, Stacey. And I just wanted to add to that. I think from a teaching perspective, whether it's verbal or written, really great writing, great communication is really the key. And that's sometimes you may just put in a reflection point where you get someone to think about something. It's about how you use your words, how you use your pauses, how you use your questions. And that's fundamentally what it is. Doesn't matter what platform.
You would have to test out everything you can with your organisation systems as well. A quiz in Canvas is very different from a quiz in Moodle. It's very different from a quiz in Storyline or Rise. So you're almost taking stock of every single activity or resource you can use, and coming with a collated list of these are the things that work okay on mobile. These are the ones that take you out of the app and into another system. To me, that's broken. So I would only use these items here. From there, it's providing the support and the instructions just for those ones. Because if someone comes along, teachers come along all the time, they go, hey, can we try this? Can we try that? It's like, yeah, but we've already got this tool. This tool works. I mean, if it's something you want to pursue, maybe get them on board as a champion to actually do the testing with you as well. Because some people just throw out ideas and assume you'll take care of the rest.
Can I just add to that? Another problems we had with it, talking about assessments, we had pictures inside the assessment. What's the difference between this picture, and this picture? We had to remove them all. We had to rewrite it because they couldn't see it. So there was an assessment based, worked here, doesn't work out there.
Cool. We've only got a couple more minutes, so we might only just do like one or two more. Did anybody have any final questions? Yvette, hello.
So traditionally, all the roles in a team have been quite separate, and it's becoming more apparent that you kind of like need to know a little bit about everyone's roles in the team and sort of like the end result. So do you have any suggestions about how we can work better as a team and get better knowledge of how to create like content in these different mediums and keep up to date with what is actually possible?
Yes, I think in my team that I encourage them all to work together and to progress through problems together. So when we're working on a new program or a new project, we will take 2-3 times a week. We will work through what one person has done, and we'll critique is the right word, what they have done, and how we can make it better. So the whole team is learning from each other. They are seeing what one person has done, how they can make it better, and we're all kind of being involved in the process. So it's not just laying out stuff on Canvas on LMS page, it's making graphics, making the UX good, making, maybe there's something you could add in the HTML and the CSS that would make this flow and visually better. When we're working, I found this when working in universities, you're working by yourself and on your own, and then you produce that by yourself. I don't really like that, and within my team and our whole organization, it's a collective effort in how we design. It's not just one person. And then one person has a good opinion, but in reality, that doesn't work on a mobile app or it doesn't work on a desktop. So I'm always encouraging to just share what each other does or promote what each other does, and to get them to actually question each other. We all like each other, but I get them to question what they do and why they're doing it.
In our business, we have to be very efficient so we can provide a great customer service. So we don't have a lot of time for necessarily learning skills outside our own role. But that said, I think one of the greatest things for me is and I think for anyone, is being very curious about what other people are doing, being very curious about new tools that have come out, and just giving things a go. So for me, as someone who is not a developer, using rapid tools like Evolve or Rise has been really great, and I've learnt a lot of the lessons that I showed you today, I've learnt through using that tool, because I'm just doing it, I'm experimenting, and then I'm having a look at the result and I see, oh, actually, that doesn't work. So yeah, that's for us, but we don't have a lot of time to really workshop things as a whole team or to learn things outside our own role. Although as a learning designer project manager, which is usually how our learning designers work, we need to be pretty much across everything at some level. So it's a job, out of all of the roles in our organisation, it's the one job where you need to understand UX, you need to understand a bit about graphic design, you need to understand a bit about development, as well as being a great learning designer and project manager. And that's come through experience, I think. So yeah, that's us.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Damala, I have a question for you. You mentioned that a GIF animation should not exceed 5 seconds many times. Could you explain why the 5 second limit?
Sure. So this actually came out from when we got a technical accessibility review done for our Department of Education training on making accessible documents. And one of the things we used in there was an animated GIF showing the correct and incorrect ways to set up tables. And it was just very simple. And when I went through the review, they said, this is fine, but it's perpetually moving content. So you need to actually stop it at 5 seconds and you'll be fine. So that's what we did. So that's obviously, having gone through a professional accessibility review, that was the outcome of that they were happy with the animated GIF as long as it didn't move, it didn't continue moving. So, and you can do that. You can make an animated GIF. When you make it up in Photoshop, it can actually just stop. It doesn't need to loop necessarily. So most of our experiences of GIFs are really annoying, fast-moving, looping things. That's not how they have to. There are a lot of options for using animated GIFs, and they can be very slow, they can be very subtle, but they can be really practical in terms of just sequencing some information that will actually fit on a small screen. 5 seconds is the rule for accessibility. So.
Sure.
Just add up thing about the GIF. Because the GIF is present a small short animation, if you loop more than twice or 3 times, it will distract the students to look at the other content as well. So it's better keep it simple, small, and repeat it once or twice and stop.
The reason I asked is because we do use GIF for quite a number of things, but our GIFs are at a refresh rate of about 15 frames per second or 24 frames per second. So they run just like a video would be. They are optimized, but because it runs like a video, we found that even a 15-second GIF or a 20-second GIF doesn't have much of an impact in terms of accessibility. So I was just wondering why the 5-second limitation for that would be.
That's a really good question, and I think I might follow that up with Vision Australia, who are our accessibility experts that we work with. I think it's more about perpetually moving content, so looping content that's just constantly moving on screen. And as you said, it's distracting. So if you're trying to read some content on screen and you've got this image that's perpetually moving, if it's just a scene that's playing out, which it sounds like you're using it, like in that sense, it's playing out and it's almost like in place of a video. I would suspect that that would be fine. But once again, I would probably, if accessibility is important, which I think it is for RMIT, then I would just be getting that checked, I guess, with the experts.
Right on, guys. I reckon we might have to wrap it up. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to the speakers, Damala, Stacey and Colin. We got some booze for you as well to say a little along. And thank you everybody for coming to this. We hope to see you at the next one. Really great turnout, great questions, great conversation. Cheers. That was I'm going to have to take off. It was lovely to meet you. Yeah, have a good one.
That was very, very interesting. Well done. Thank you very much.